Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm Jerry Theo, and with the Healing Generations podcast, the Healing Generations Institute. And I want to welcome you today to another day, to another opportunity in which we really invite ancestors and all the wisdom of generations to come be present with us and to come live so that we can live in a good way, in a good, healthy, harmonious way, but also so that we can heal the generations of trauma that have come through that journey and address the issues that we need to address. So, with that, I'd like just to invite you to just take a deep breath, and wherever you're at, just ground yourself. We honor those people of the land that you're on, wherever you're at. Just take a moment and just acknowledge them and the spirit that is still there. I want to acknowledge all of your ancestors, all those that you know and don't know, but that live within your spirit today, all those that have sacrificed and done so many things to allow us to be here, have struggled, and some of that struggle and some of that pain is still with us today. So we want to invite those ancestors in to guide us, to guide this conversation today. But also, if they need to heal anymore, then they can come and join us in that journey too, because it's an interconnected journey. But I want to thank you if this is your first time, if you've heard us these discussions before, then really it's just part of a ceremony. We just come here and gather and share, talk and see where it leads us, and we all do it in a good way to offer blessings to all of you that way. And, very, very pleased and honored today to have just a good friend of mine, a sister, a leader in our community, a wisdom keeper who has done so much for so many people, is an example of that, of those blessings, of that generational wisdom that comes. She's also, a lawyer and is co-founded an organization that's focused on restorative justice, restorative practice. But she does so much more for so many people, guides people and really tries to bring healing to the world in the best way. And so we're very, very pleased. I'm very pleased to invite and have with us Sujatha Baliga today, who, is just has so much to share. And I want to just welcome you and give you the opportunity to greet the people that are listening.
Thank you so much, Jerry. And it's very humbling to hear you say these things. I am trying to grow into being the things that you are saying more and more every day. And I think my greeting to people listening is just thank you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for showing up for this conversation between myself and such a wonderful person who I've learned so much from over the years in so many different contexts. And thank you for just showing up. Thank you for showing up in the world today. Thank you for waking up and for getting out of bed. Or maybe you're still in bed. But thank you. Thank you for opening your eyes or keeping your eyes closed. Thank you for whichever way you need to be right now in this moment today. So just thank you.
Well, thank you for that greeting. And, I wonder if we could begin by just sharing a little about who you are and where you come from, your ancestors, your relatives, and all that makes up of who you are.
Well, today I'll start by saying that I'm speaking to you from Berkeley, California, which is the unceded land of the Ohlone people, the Muwekma Ohlone. And so I just want to start by naming that in my current location. Feels like it's important to start with where I am right now, just briefly. And then a little bit about how I came here. So my people, so I'm the child of Sarala Baliga Ni Shenoy. And my father was Mohandas Baliga. He was born the day Gandhiji was released from prison, which is a part of why he got the name Mohandas. And our people are the Konkani people, specifically the Gaud Saraswat Brahmins of the Konkan region. We came via Kashmir in northern India through to Bihar, and then from there moved to what's called the Konkan coast, and ultimately, primarily in the place called Goa, but my people are also from a town called Mangalore. And my people have a fraught history. I come from the upper caste of my community, and there's been a whole lot of oppression in the caste system. And so there's a lot that I carry there in terms of the repair that needs to be done to those who a stratified society was extremely harmful in this way. And at the same time, I come from people who kept a beautiful religious tradition alive. Very specific set of teachings our caste held, the prayers of our ancestors, held the rituals, held the all the scriptures, all the scriptural knowledge in a particular lineage, which is it's a very complex thing to carry, that mix of things. And so my people were colonized by the Portuguese, and people don't think a lot about the Portuguese colonization of India, the parts of India that were colonized by the Portuguese. And that colonization was quite brutal. It was different than what was done by the British. It was brutal and totalizing and quite violent and was fully thorough. So whenever I'm in India and I meet tourists who say, oh, I need a break from India, I'm going to go to Goa, that offends me quite deeply, because what people are saying is I need to get where it feels more European, because my people have forgotten who they were. They were fully culturally erased. And then there were those of us who fled and became a diaspora across South India and ultimately across the world. And so I have family on every continent. And the Portuguese were not driven from India until the 1960s, unlike the British who left in the 40s. So that's a little bit about my people's history, and sort of my spiritual lineage has been I'm just starting to unpack it now. But for reasons of feeling a deep fundamental disconnect on several levels with the Hinduism that I was raised with, and particularly with regards to deep confusion that I had with regard to the way in which the caste system played itself out in India, I left the faith of my ancestors and found my way to Tibetan Buddhism only 20 years thereafter to find out that some of the teachings of the Buddha were lost to the land of my ancestors, India, and were taken before they were lost by people who had studied with the Konkani people back to Tibet, where it was kept alive. And so this is a strange, circuitous way in which, having left my family and left my family religion, I ended up coming back in touch with the teachings that were lost to my own people through the Tibetan people. And so my practice now is at the feet of many Tibetan masters. And it felt like a homecoming at a cellular level that I didn't understand at that time. But in my study of Tibetan Buddhism and in my study of law, in my study of the Tibetan system of justice prior to Chinese occupation, I started to feel something percolating in me. And as I wrote back to my friends in America who are lawyers, death penalty lawyers, one of them said to me, my dear friend Susan Marcus said, what you're talking about is restorative justice. And so there are all these intersections that brought me to where I am. And I think, maybe I'll just stop there for now and see what you'd like to say about that, Jerry. Or
no. It's interesting how that circle of life comes back to you. You know, you can think that you're going one way, and it really just kind of brings you back. You know, we are who we are, and we are part of our lineage, and you know, we think we may escape it or get away from it, but it's going to face us. You know. And many of those things we see in society today, those things that are out right now facing us. You know, I'm sure in order to be able to survive and get through this journey, you've gone through a number of teachings. There's been a number of challenges. Can you share some of those teachings and those challenges that really have given you insight into, you know, people and their struggles and their woundedness and maybe the hope to heal?
Thank you for this beautiful question. So, you know, I was born in rural Pennsylvania, and you know, my mother didn't want to be in this country, but my father insisted that we stay here. And so there was a lot of back and forth when I was a child for lengthy periods of my childhood. And, you know, every time we left India, I felt fundamentally disconnected from myself and from my people and from a more collectivist way of living, right? With multi-generational homes. Everyone cooked together and ate together and prayed together every night. This huge, beautiful altar. And the children were responsible for gathering the flowers from the yard to bring to the altar. And we all knew the same prayers. We all spoke my first language, which is Konkani. And I think that one of my greatest sufferings has been being disconnected from where my body was essentially intended to be, right? And at the same time, I really understand why my father left and what he was looking for. And I really understand the suffering of his life of not having found it in the United States. And I think that he was looking for a more egalitarian society. And I think that there was something about individualism that drew him. And that I think he saw the downsides of some aspects of collectivist societies and very collective families that have certain expectations of how everyone ought to be. And so that was one of the biggest sufferings that I think I've experienced in my life. And my father had many other sufferings. And tragically, having not healed his own traumas, he passed them on to us. And the greatest one, although in general, we kind of lived in fear of him in some ways all the time. I was quite a spunky and oppositional child. And so other ways of sort of suppressing my mother or my sister were ineffective on me. And so my father ultimately began sexually abusing me. And so I lived with that for many years. In the beginning, I think it was subtle and confusing, and it hadn't reached a point of extremity such that I could, and not to downplay any of those things, you should never touch a child inappropriately, period. But I didn't understand it to be abuse until I started to develop into a young woman in my early teens. I was like, what is happening? What my father's doing to me is wrong. And so, I kept it to myself, but I spiraled into an unimaginable depression and self-hatred and a lot of self-harm, cutting myself, suicidality, but was sort of externally trying to manifest as this, good Indian girl, trying to get good grades, trying to, go to all these vocal competitions and playing the violin and doing all the things I was supposed to do, but I wasn't doing them well. And I was starting to suffer, and my grades were suffering, and my singing was suffering, and my life was suffering. So that was an incredibly brutal time in my life. And there was no one I could turn to in rural Pennsylvania because my family experienced quite a bit of racism. And so for me, having no one to turn to, having no one to tell, when I would intimate that something was wrong in our family, I could feel people, that the racism was coming up. Like there was an expectation that there would be something wrong with our family because we were immigrants, and so I knew to keep my mouth shut. And so I suffered in silence until he passed away when I was 16. And I think that that's the other great trauma of my childhood, really, in addition to the racism that we were living with, which was truly brutal. The loss of my father was actually devastating. And even though there were times when I had prayed for his death, when he died, when I was 16 years old, I think that was maybe the hardest thing, because I believe that there would have been a possibility to heal our relationship, and his death took that chance away in this lifetime. And so I believe that it will heal. It is already healing. It has healed so much even since he's passed. But I wish for him to live so that we could heal it. And so those were some of the greatest struggles that I had. And I think with regard to my father, there's a word that I learned actually from reading a book called No Future Without Forgiveness by the Archbishop Desmond Tutu about the Truth and Reconciliation process in South Africa. And in that book, there's this word Ubuntu. And it means I am because we are, or a person is a person through other people. And I love this word so much. And I think it became very clear to me when I was thinking about this word that this was so true about my relationship with my father, that I couldn't make him just purely evil, the offender, the bad guy, on a number of counts, in part because our relationship wasn't purely terrible. that it was complicated, and that there were many ways in which he was a very good man and a good father. And so I think what this word said, I am because we are, or a person is a person through other people. I mean, this was literally, in my case, because I am his biological child, literally true. I am because my father was. Both my struggles and my blessings and my very existence, I am because he was. Whew. And I couldn't erase him, because then I would have to erase myself, or half of me. I'm also am because of my mother.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge lesson. That's a huge thing that I have had to, there's an incredible gift to unpack for the rest of my life, box inside of box inside of box, and that gift.
Yeah. Even though you didn't really explain it, I really feel that the multiple dimensions of your life, of your lineage, of your faith, of the work that you've done, allows you to speak about your father and the challenges in a very different way than I've experienced, because I've worked with victims of sexual abuse before, and I know that it's extremely painful to even talk about it, and so I also feel, as you were talking, this deep sense of grace that you have been able to transform the woundedness into a teaching, so much so that you could see the blessings in your father. And to me, that's a huge lesson for the world, because we tend to live in a world that categorizes good or bad. If you're a perpetrator, you're bad, in racism we do that. We categorize people, we throw people away, we lock people up, we victimize them. All of these things that But your journey and the work that you've done, and internally and externally, then really brings to light hope for that path of true healing. True healing where that acknowledgement of the interconnectedness of all of our journeys. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, because I think it's I'm sure there's some complexity to that, and how does your faith, how does your spirituality, how does your practice, how has that helped you with all of this?
Thank you. I guess I did skip some steps there, right? And I think it's really important for the survivors listening that there's nothing in what I'm saying. I need you to know that, your journey is your journey. And if you are filled with rage at the person who harmed you, and if you need to not even say their name or not even think about their humanity at this stage in your journey, I honor that. And this took a long time to come to this place in my life. And it suits me. It suits my temperament. It suits my journey. This is my journey. This is what I am walking. And, I share it from a place of hoping that whatever our journeys are, the more that we can share them shamelessly, the more that we can speak our pain and our transcendence in all the ways that transcendence is possible, then good, then we are being lamps on the path to one another. And so that's, what I really hope my sharing can be helpful in that way. But yeah, there was definitely some help along the way from my own spiritual path. And so, I alluded earlier to the fact that I left Hinduism. And in part, it was because the questions of caste. I read Swami Ambedkar's Annihilation of Caste, and I was deeply moved by it in my late teens. And I had a question about whether or not I could remain in my faith. And I started to become interested in Buddhism, but I realized, in the same way that I toyed with Christianity earlier in my life, that my conversion for political reasons didn't feel honest. I wanted to ultimately convert for spiritual reasons, if I were to ever convert. And so I abandoned Hinduism as much as one can as a cultural Hindu, and was sort of floating with rudderless spiritually, because I'd been an incredibly religious child. Like I was, memorized all my prayers in Sanskrit and did my puja every day and knew all my prayers and practices, but I don't think I ever fully believed them, because I kept praying to this God to save me from what was happening to me. And I just never really had the faith. or I had faith, but it was crushed by that the answers never came in that way. And that wasn't my journey. And that's what that was. So I worked for years, starting as soon as my father passed away, I started getting trained in rape crisis and domestic violence. And I just turned my life towards victim advocacy. And I spent many years in that. And a couple years after college, I had moved back to India with my then boyfriend, who was a wonderful person. And he had, as a young man, when he was 16, he started going to Calcutta to work with missionaries of charity and to help people who are suffering from leprosy die with dignity. And he took me along when we were just friends before we ever got together. And this is when we were younger. And then, we ultimately became a couple, and he started working in trafficking in Mumbai. And I said I would come with him to help. And I got there and I started witnessing the suffering of that whole complex phenomenon that is trafficking, primarily of Nepali girls into India, and just the whole mess of it, the way in which there were police officers involved in the whole process and all of it. It was too thick for me. I was 24 years old at the time, and I was just unable to hold all of the horror and the complexity of what was happening there. And I really had all of my own unresolved traumas and no spiritual path. And so I had a complete breakdown during that year, just totally psychologically, spiritually lost. And I ended up going backpacking by myself. And it was somewhat a suicidal journey, I think. I just wandered off, and I was told so many times by my relatives, you can't travel alone in India as a woman, and this and that and the other. And I certainly had my troubles, but I landed in a town called Dharamshala, which is McLeodganj, Dharamshala, that area where the Tibetan community lives, the Tibetan community in exile. And through my connecting with a family there that I just got to know a little bit, they suggested, in the course of our conversations about the unbelievable traumas that their family had lived through in their process of escaping Chinese-occupied Tibet, I ultimately shared with them what I had lived through, what my rage was about. And I was so moved by their ability to forgive or to practice forgiveness. And I was so confused about what is that? Like, how do you forgive ongoing atrocities? And I could never forgive what my father did to me. And they suggested that one of the people literally said, you should ask the Dalai Lama. And I was like, how does someone ask the Dalai Lama a question? Like, how does that work? And it turns out that this totally humble family living in this teeny tiny they run this guest house, and they're all crammed into these 2 rooms. It turns out one of them was a protocol officer for the Tibetan government in exile, and he gave me some advice about where to drop a note off for the Dalai Lama at his compound, which was like 15 minutes away. And so I walked down there, tore a page out of my journal. I wrote a question or 2 for His Holiness, and I dropped it off at the compound. And a week later, I was sort of ushered into that whole to the back of that office and offered an hour with the Dalai Lama.
Wow.
And so a week later, I had an hour-long conversation with His Holiness. And in that conversation, His Holiness gave me guidance about how to forgive. But it was only because I pressed and pressed and pressed and pressed him. And he shared so deeply about his own journey of escaping, the Chinese occupation. And I mean, he was just so incredibly generous with me. And I was this angry, like seriously, mentally and spiritually unstable 24-year-old child. And his compassion was boundless. And at one point when I was pressing him for advice, he said the most important thing that has ever been said to me. I was demanding an answer. How do I forgive? You've forgiven those Chinese, government officials who lied to you. You've forgiven, how can you've forgiven so much more harm than I have experienced in my life? How do I forgive my father, who I also partially love? Like, how, give me the advice. And he leaned in, he took my hands, looked me in the eyes, and he said, do you feel you've been angry long enough? And that question was the greatest gift I've ever received. I mean, it was permission to give him an honest answer about where I was on my journey. The Mr. Forgiveness did not require me to be anywhere other than where I was. And it literally opened the door to the possibility of forgiveness.
Wow.
So I didn't forgive that day. I did follow His Holiness's advice, and the first piece of it was to meditate. He said that I had a very, very bright mind that was completely out of my own control. And he said that was the basis of my rage, And so raging was unhealthy. I had migraines, I had stomach problems, I had all kinds. I was a disaster. And he said, you might want to try meditation. And so I began my journey through that. I started going to 10-day silent meditation retreats, and I've done so many of those now. And then I ultimately took His Holiness as one of my gurus, and I have many Tibetan masters who I have this incredible blessing of having access to them and having been guided by them for 20-some years now. And it is through my Buddhist faith that I am able to do anything that I do today, my daily practice. Ideally, most days, almost all days. I have a puppy now, and I also have a child. And so that makes 5 a.m. meditation sometimes difficult. Prayer and practice every day, 5:30 in the morning. And sometimes I go back to bed. If I get up early enough, I can get all my prayers and practices done before my family is awake, and then I can get back into bed and then get up at the beginning of the day with my son and help him start the day. So,
wow. That's amazing. It's profound. It kind of makes me think about in our native tradition how when people are wounded, they say that you must call your spirit back, because it's been embraced by a wound of somebody else. And so you must call your spirit back, ground it. Who are you really? You are not your wound. You are not what has happened to you. So that meditation, that prayer, that ceremony of calling your spirit back to be grounded, to be whole, to be holy, to be sacred, to be a blessing is what you're describing. And I think in what many indigenous communities we call to. And it's very different in Western society because the focus becomes the wound. The focus becomes the target, if you will. And what I hear you describing is the Dalai Lama asking you, okay, if you're here and that's where you need to be, then be there. But if you're ready to transition, and I know even you're talking about your body. I know when we're doing meditation or guiding people, we say, you're ready to give your body permission to release this, to let go. Because if you're not, it's going to stay. If you're not ready to let your body relax and say, okay, it's okay to drop your shoulders. It's okay to release that anxiety there. If you're not going to give it permission, it's not going to go there. And so what a beautiful teaching, what a beautiful teaching that you receive and you live and now you share with other people, and so thank you for sharing those intimate, parts of your journey, I wonder if you could talk now about how that has impacted your work, because you've done amazing work all over. But you mentioned restorative justice and restorative practice, but really that's really about healing, right? And I wonder if you can talk about that, because I think, when people think of restorative justice, they think of certain ways and certain, formulas and curriculum and all of that. But I know your work is a whole different, comes from a different philosophy and level. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I think that a part of my work comes from being a public survivor, right? And I think that predated my connection to restorative justice in a sense. I've been speaking, publicly for some time about my own journey to healing and to letting go of my rage. And I do think that it starts with this feeling that, or this knowledge of what we call Buddha nature, right? Which is that a fundamental primordial mind is actually always untainted by all these things that happen to us. And that it's our ignorance about the way in which the universe actually operates, which is interdependent. And ultimately, everything is changing, and everything is created by infinite causes and conditions. And this is beautiful mystery of this continual, constant, infinitely co-createdness that we are all in, that leaves us fundamentally unsullied by the things that have been done to us, and even by the things that we have done to others. And so we're going to go very far astray from what we truly are if we get too fixated on those things. And again, I don't want to downplay the amount of work that we need to do in very specific ways about the things that have happened or that we've done in this lifetime. But I think that that's sort of the starting point for my thinking around restorative justice, right? And I think that some of the Western formulation that you share, there's this way in which we talk about victims and offenders and a victim-offender dialogue and things. And I'm not trying to downplay any of those models. I know that they've been beneficial to people. But to me, ultimately, I don't believe in any of those words. I don't call myself a victim. Sometimes I say survivor, sometimes for political purposes when people are saying, well, the victims lobby wants this or that. I'm like, do we? Did you ask any people of color if we really want more prisons? But, I think any of those labels leave us really fixed in time. And I think my work around bringing people to dialogue, to circles, to conferences, to whichever approach and whichever cultural approach feels most appropriate for your own community, because there's so many different ways to practice restorative justice or to walk restoratively, right? Is that ultimately, I hope that it's going to be an experience where people realize that we don't have to have like good guys and bad guys, and that we're really trying to get rid of this notion of us, them, victor, vanquished, the way that, I'm a former public defender. I know what it's like to be in court and to see the two sides and to know that, then I would have to have two sides within me. I know that I have done incredible harm in my lifetime to other people through careless words, but actually through careless actions and even purposeful actions, right? And so if I'm supposed to be this perfect victim, then do I get to actually be a whole human being? And when someone has done some unthinkable harm, does it erase the suffering that they have experienced? So I've never been inside a prison and talked to anyone who's done anything terrible that hasn't had so much worse happen to them, right? And so to try to make people all one thing is not okay. It's actually just wildly inaccurate. And at the same time, when people cause harm, that there's accountability that needs to be there, right? There has to be an opportunity for repair and healing. And what I think the community's responsibility is to create spaces in which people can take full responsibility for what they do. So my work has been, it's been sort of in these two different buckets. One is the one in which I operate in relationship to the state and the systems. And I have my lawyer hat a little bit on as I do that. I try to figure out, how can we create a diversion program for young people who are getting incarcerated for things where we actually, if we worked with the people that they harmed, that, for these even quite serious felony cases, we could actually bring them face to face for a dialogue, and the community could support this young person to repair the harm to the person that they've, just to repair the harm directly. And all of this could be done instead of charging a child with a crime or an adult. And how do we work with the district attorneys and the public defenders and the community-based organizations to try to set those systems up, right? And then leaving that more sacred work to the community-based organizations to do. And it's complicated because the dance there, when you're operating in relationship to the state, it's always been my struggle, my deep struggle about how do we secularize sacred teachings in a way that leaves them sufficiently sacred so that they're still the medicine. And I struggle with this in the Western manifestations of things like mindfulness and yoga, and none of that is the Dharma, right? You can't call yourself a Dharma teacher because you're teaching people how to breathe, and you can't call yourself, a yogi. You don't really know what any of that actually means. And at the same time, people learning to watch their breath is a wonderful thing. And I would want everyone to have that. The positions that we put our bodies into when we go to a Western yoga studio is actually strengthening your body. That's good, but how do you do it in a way that's not disrespectful? So that's sort of the dance on the state connected side of the work. And then also a dance around how do we create these processes in a way that it makes sure that the people are protected from the state, right? Because being in the circle can be a truth serum, right? And then you confess everything, but then what if the system then tries to use that information, right, against you if the thing ends up in court? And so sometimes I have to have my lawyer brain on to protect that stuff, make sure that the district attorneys sign a document that protects the participants from using the information in court, those sorts of things. And then the other part of my work has been working at more the community-based level, just more directly. When there's somebody who's been raped by someone, they can call me, and people know to call. And sometimes I bring those people face to face and just have a dialogue completely off the grid. Like, don't call the cops, call me. I'm not actually advocating that because I don't have the time and energy for that anymore. So please don't call me. But, occasionally I do. And I've helped sort of guiding some folks through their own journeys of developing their own chops for facilitating those dialogues directly. And so some organizations I work with, some different, and because I will say no these days, because I'm trying to write some books and things, and I say, I can't, but here's somebody who might be able to, here's somebody who might be able to. And hopefully sooner than later, all those places will be able to hang out a shingle and say, we're here, and we're here so that people can actually have a direct dialogue without any engagement with the state. And that's deeply, it's exciting to me. I'm very hopeful about that.
Well, what you're talking about is about healing. How do we heal, each other? How do we heal communities? How do we heal families? How do we heal the world? And I think, contrary to, even though everybody's using the word healing now, right? I'm not sure they're speaking about it in the same way that you're speaking about it. I mean, they're talking about it in a systematic way many times. It's not, because the true healing really means a transformation, not only of people, but of systems and the whole universe is how we even approach life, right? So I really appreciate you lifting that up and you really pointing that out, that can happen and that has happened. And part of your work has really been to manifest that, and that type of work is going on, and you and a whole number of other people that I have, come to know are really on this healing journey of really trying to create space and processes for us to heal these generations of woundedness and trauma, but also to bring the light, the medicine that is within all of us, I'm wondering as we close today is if you would just share some advice, some counsel, some wisdom, whatever comes through you that you'd like to offer, especially for that next generation that is coming through. We're kind of moving a little bit to that other side, getting a little bit older in our journey, and we need that next generation to come up. But we don't need them to go through all the stuff that we went through or have to battle. What kind of counsel or advice or blessing would you offer to them?
Yeah. So when I was a young one, before my father passed away, I spent all day, every day practicing singing. And I have a set of pipes. I have a good set of pipes. And I was being sort of wooed by all these different music conservatories. And I was going to be an opera singer, if you can imagine.
Wow.
And so what happened was, because of my coping mechanisms, I started to damage my voice, I think. And I also started speaking a lot lower, not in my own voice, what's the natural register for me. And I was sort of doing damage to my voice and partying and things. And so I wasn't sure. And I also wasn't sure about being an opera singer. Like, it just didn't sit with my soul. It didn't feel like it. While I had the skill for it, the music didn't speak to my soul. I wanted to learn Carnatic music, South Indian music, what my mother sang. But again, I was quite dissociated from those things. So I remember writing in my journal that I kind of wanted to stop the suffering of the world, and I didn't know how, and I didn't think being an opera singer was it, and I was deeply tortured. Should I quit? Should I go to college? Should I study this? Should I study that? What should I do? And I had I found it a few years ago. This is my 16-year-old handwriting saying, it doesn't matter what I do as long as I am either eradicating suffering or creating beauty. And I thought, well, that's a very sweet thing, for a 16-year-old, 17, I think maybe it was when I wrote that. But also that's not, that there's something now that I see that those are actually the same thing. Like, the world is beautiful, and anytime you're eradicating suffering, you're uncovering the beauty, right? And anytime you're creating beauty, you're alleviating suffering.
Wow.
And so you're good.
Wow.
And so what makes your heart sing? What makes you get goosebumps? What makes you feel like you are really heart, mind, and soul aligned, and don't feel like you have to leave any of those things out, right? I found my way to work and to wonder and to awe, and that I'm at 50 in a couple months, and I still feel awe and wonder, the sense of not knowing something and feeling excitement about what's around the corner, and that's both in my work and in my parenting. And so really just allowing yourself to feel sort of the security in the groundlessness of not knowing what's around the corner, and just listening to your body, listening to your your mind and your soul and your heart and all of it, and letting that congruity where you feel that clicking together, that congruity. And then you can just check, like, is this eradicating suffering, creating beauty? Is this good? Let's go. Let's go, keep going in that direction. That's what I would say to young people out there. And also, I think that if, we all have our trauma to heal. So many of us have been through so many things, and so many people have had to live through things too young, Yeah. And there are many, many times in my life where I have dropped out, where I walked across India for a year once when I was younger, right? I didn't go straight from college to law school. I didn't do the things, if there's a family business that you are expected to try to have some dialogues with your family and say, I need some time. I need a pause. I need to know myself better. I need to walk the earth. I need to get more clear. I need to do a bit of a walkabout or a healing journey of my own. I got a lot of pressure along the way to keep going and do what I'm supposed to do in a particular order. And every time I didn't, because I was listening to this, my heart and my mind and my body and everything saying, don't do that yet. Maybe you'll still do it. Don't do that yet. It's always been a blessing that I waited. It's always been, I didn't miss anything. After all those years of stopped practicing law, I found my way to restorative justice. I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, what are you doing? Like, why'd you bother going to law school? Why'd you bother this much? It's just been from blessing to blessing to blessing. And so that is, I guess that's what I'd say. Just listen to the wisdom within you. Yeah.
And that is deep wisdom. That is deep wisdom that you're sharing about looking at helping people to ease that suffering, but contribute to the blessings. And that journey is, is sometimes a circular journey or a winding journey that has different rhythms to the song, the song that you were talking about. It comes with different rhythms, But certainly, what you have offered the world and what you have contributed to the world with your life, with your teachings, with your honesty, with your truth, has truly been a blessing to all of us. It's been a blessing to me, and it's been a blessing to so many people that I know, that when they refer to you, you can feel their spirit light up, So I want to thank you. I want to acknowledge you and your ancestors, that have contributed to your path and who you are, and really appreciate you for your voice and for your spirit and for your honesty and for your work and for your example. Thank you so much for all that you do and all that you've done and all that you're going to do. But thank you for spending this time with us today.
Oh, thank you, Jerry. What a blessing. And I am just breathing as you are saying these kind things to me, and just trying to let them sink in a little bit. So thank you.
I want to invite the listeners, to take a moment, before you go on to your next Zoom call or your next checking email or whatever you got to do. Just take a couple of moments and sit with the teachings and with the blessing and with the vibration that you heard today. How does it impact you? How might it contribute to your journey? How might it enhance who you are and what you are, to recognize that you are sacred and a blessing just the way you are, just right where you are right now. I want to invite you to continue listening, share this podcast with others, and give us some feedback too. We're always learning, we're always growing, and we're always open to continue this path, as the true goal is lifting up those ancestors' medicine and teachings and healing the generations of pain. Thank you very, very much, and have a beautiful, wonderful, blessed day.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.